I learned the meaning of fear by watching humans wage war. Carell had never seen a species like humans before. From the observation deck of his small scout ship, he watched the planet below with a mixture of curiosity and unease. The planet was green and blue, with wide forests, winding rivers, and tall mountains. Clouds drifted lazily in the sky, and the sun reflected on the water like scattered diamonds. It looked peaceful, almost perfect. Yet Carol knew that peace could be dangerous. The humans were tiny, fragile creatures. He had studied hundreds of species across galaxies, and most of them relied on size, strength, or natural weapons to survive. Humans had none of these advantages. Their skin was soft, their bodies weak, and their teeth were small. Yet even from this height, Carl could see something strange about them. They moved with purpose. They built shelters. They farmed the land. They walked in groups and looked out for one another. There was a strange energy in their behavior, a determination that made him uneasy. Carl focused on one settlement near a wide river. It was small, maybe a few hundred humans, but it had walls made of stone and wood. Smoke rose from chimneys, and he could see children running and adults working. Some humans carried tools. Others carried weapons. Although the weapons were small and simple, Carell had expected weakness. He had not expected confidence. Captain Daniel Price walked through the main square of the settlement, giving quiet instructions to his people. He was tall for a human and strong, though not by alien standards. His eyes were sharp, always scanning, always measuring. Beside him walked Lieutenant Lisa Monroe, moving quickly to check on the perimeter. Her hair was tied back, and her steps were precise. Even from Carol's distant view, it was clear she trusted no one blindly. The humans were unaware of Carol watching them. They had no idea that their world was under observation, that someone, or something, had already decided that they were interesting. Carol adjusted his instruments, zooming in on a small group of humans near the edge of the forest. They were practicing combat drills, holding sticks and metal rods like weapons. The movements were awkward, not refined, but there was a rhythm to them. He noticed the way they communicated with each other. Quick gestures, short words, laughter, and sharp warnings. Curious, Carell whispered to himself. Jack! Curiosity was an emotion he understood, but fear was not. Yet even as he watched, something stirred deep in his mind. Something like unease or caution. The humans were fragile, yes, but there was a spark in them that made him pause. The first warning came silently. Sensors on his ship picked up strange energy readings from the outer edge of the forest. Something was moving, something not human. The Thren. Carl had expected them. The Thren were a violent species, larger and stronger than humans, with claws and teeth designed to tear through metal. They traveled in squads and took what they wanted. Carol had seen entire planets fall to their raids. He expected the humans to run, to hide, to scatter in fear. But what he saw instead made him stop his instruments in shock. Daniel Price stood at the edge of the wall, looking at the approaching threat. He shouted, and the humans nearest to him formed a line, raising their small weapons. Some of the villagers grabbed farming tools, anything they could use. Lisa Monroe ran to Daniel's side, directing the young and the old to safe positions. Carol's heart, or whatever organ controlled the alien equivalent, beat faster. The humans were facing something that should have crushed them, and yet they did not falter. They faced it head-on. The first Thren appeared above the tree line, their massive bodies moving with terrifying speed. Their claws glimmered in the sunlight, and their eyes glowed faintly red. They roared, a sound that could make weaker species collapse with fear. The humans did not run. They shouted back. They threw stones. They swung sticks. The Thren laughed, a deep, cruel sound, expecting an easy victory. But the humans were clever. Carol watched as a young man, Ryan Miller, ran to a pile of wood and rocks and began arranging them quickly. He lit a small fire, which sent smoke curling into the air. The smoke confused the Thren, making them pause. Other humans joined in, creating more distractions, luring the Thren into traps that had been prepared in advance. Daniel Price led a small group forward, using the terrain to their advantage. They ducked behind rocks, jumped from trees, and struck the Thren where the claws could not reach. Lisa Monroe helped pull a group of children to safety, then turned back to fight. Every human movement was full of risk, yet full of determination. Karel felt something unfamiliar. It was not curiosity this time. It was fear. He had seen fear in many species before, but never like this. These humans seemed to welcome danger, to meet it with courage rather than submission. They were small, weak, and yet terrifying. Not because of strength, but because of their willingness to fight, despite knowing the odds. The Thren roared again and charged. A few humans fell, struck by claws or thrown into the dirt, but others replaced them instantly, pressing forward without hesitation. Claire Thompson, a civilian engineer, had built a small device that shot sparks and smoke. She stood at the top of a small hill, using it to drive the Thren back. Each attack seemed dangerous, reckless even, but it worked. Karel adjusted his scanners, trying to understand the human mind. Why did they not flee? Why did they not surrender? He studied their faces, their eyes wide with fear yet burning with resolve. It was paradoxical. Fear was supposed to stop a species from acting, but here it seemed to give them strength. Hours passed. The battle did not end, yet the humans held their ground. Karel could see the exhaustion in their movements. Their breaths were heavy, their bodies bruised, yet they kept moving. They adapted quickly, learning from each strike, setting new traps, predicting the Thren's behavior. Even when a Thren tore through part of their wall, the humans rebuilt it immediately, using whatever they could find. Karel realized that this was the first time he had ever truly studied fear. He had read about it in reports, seen its effects, understood its triggers. But what he saw now was different. Fear did not make humans run. It did not make them hide. Fear sharpened them. Fear made them clever. Fear made them dangerous. Daniel Price shouted orders, moving with calm precision, even though he must have been terrified inside. Lisa Monroe ran alongside him, directing civilians and fighters alike. Ryan Miller worked furiously to build new defenses. Claire Thompson continued her strange device, creating sparks and smoke. Every human had a role. Every human moved with purpose. Karel began recording everything, knowing that this observation might change the way he understood life itself. The humans were fragile, yet unstoppable. They were small, yet terrifying. They were alone, yet united. As night fell, the Thren retreated temporarily, forced back by the humans' clever traps and relentless attacks. The humans stood in the ruins of their walls, exhausted and wounded, yet alive. Daniel Price looked over the settlement, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. He spoke softly to his people, reassuring them, but his eyes remained alert. Karel watched in silence. He understood now that humans were not ordinary. They were not just a simple species trying to survive. They were something else, something dangerous, something frightening in its own way. He had studied fear, but he had never experienced it in the same way he felt it now. The humans had survived the first attack. They had faced creatures that should have killed them and had not only survived but fought back. Karel leaned closer to the viewport, his mind racing. He realized that the lesson he would remember most from this planet was not about the Thren, not about strategy, not even about survival. It was about the humans themselves. He had learned the meaning of fear by watching humans wage war, and he understood that this fear was unlike anything he had ever known. It was not a weakness. It was not a limit. It was a weapon, a force that made them unpredictable and unstoppable. For the first time in his life, Karel felt a twinge of doubt about what he thought he knew about strength and power. He had assumed that only the strongest survived, that only the biggest and fastest could dominate. But these humans were neither strong nor fast, and yet they were winning. Not because of what they had, but because of what they were willing to face. The stars above the planet twinkled, calm and distant. The humans below cleaned up, tended the wounded, and rebuilt their walls. Karel watched them, fascinated and unsettled. He did not know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. He would never underestimate humans again. And as the wind rustled through the trees and the night settled over the small human settlement, Carol understood a truth that no book or lesson could have taught him. Fear was not the end. Fear was the beginning. And humans had just begun. The morning sun rose over the human settlement, casting light on walls patched with wood and stone. Smoke from small fires curled into the sky, and the air smelled of wet earth and burned wood. The humans moved quickly, their bodies tired, but their spirits unbroken. Carol watched from his ship, still hidden above the planet, trying to understand them. Captain Daniel Price walked through the settlement, checking on his people. Some were wounded, their clothes torn, their faces streaked with dirt. He nodded at them, offering words of encouragement. "We survived last night," he said. "That's a start. Stay ready. They will come again." His voice was calm, but Carell could sense the tension beneath it. Daniel Price carried the weight of his people on his shoulders, and he bore it without complaint. Lieutenant Lisa Monroe helped a group of children carry water from the river. She moved with careful precision, making sure each child was safe. Carell noticed her every movement, noting how humans could manage danger and still care for others at the same time. In his experience, most species would focus on survival first and leave the weak behind. Humans did not. They helped each other, even when the odds were against them. Ryan Miller was already at work. He inspected weapons, repaired broken tools, and designed new devices from scavenged materials. Carol watched as Ryan picked up pieces of metal and old wires, twisting them into a small trap. The young man's hands moved quickly, but his eyes stayed alert. He seemed to understand that the Thryn would return, and that preparation could make the difference between life and death. Claire Thompson ran along the top of a hill, testing her strange device. Sparks flew from it, and smoke rose into the air. She adjusted some wires and tightened bolts, making small changes to improve its function. Carell observed her closely. She was not a fighter by nature, yet she had found a way to fight, a way to turn ordinary materials into a weapon. Humans could adapt faster than any species he had seen. The first Thryn patrol returned at mid-morning. Carl watched as they moved through the forest, their red eyes scanning, their claws ready. They roared, a warning to the humans below. The humans did not scatter. Instead, Daniel Price raised his hand, signaling his fighters to hold position. The humans had learned from the previous night. They had studied the Thryn's movements, anticipated their attacks, and prepared traps. Stones were piled in hidden spots, nets were stretched between trees, and small pits had been dug in the ground. Even the simplest tools were put to use, sharpened or reinforced for defense. The Thryn advanced, confident and cruel, expecting the humans to run, but the humans stayed in place. When the first Thryn reached the traps, it fell into a pit, its roar echoing through the forest. Others tripped on wires, fell into nets, or were forced back by sparks and smoke from Claire's device. The humans moved quickly, taking advantage of every mistake the Thryn made. Daniel Price led a small group through the edge of the forest, attacking from unexpected angles. Lisa Monroe followed, protecting civilians who had been sent to safer areas. Carell watched in fascination as humans used not just weapons, but their minds. They tricked, confused, and outsmarted a much larger and stronger enemy. At one point, a Thryn broke through part of the trap line. It moved toward the settlement, claws raised. A young man, Alex Carter, ran forward with a makeshift spear, his hands shaking but his eyes steady. He struck at the Thryn, forcing it back, even as it tried to grab him. Carell felt something unfamiliar. The human did not flee, did not hesitate, and yet he was clearly afraid. He acted, despite fear. The fight continued for hours. Humans and Thryn clashed in small groups, each side testing the other. Carol observed the humans' communication. They shouted warnings, gave quick signals, and adjusted their plans in real time. Even when a human fell, another took his place. There was no panic, only determination. Ryan Miller had set up a trap near the river. He had arranged stones and wires in a pattern that could collapse part of a small bridge. When a Thryn squad crossed, the bridge fell, sending them into the water. The humans did not wait. They pressed their advantage, pushing the Thryn back toward the forest edge. Claire Thompson used her device to cover their retreat. Sparks and smoke created confusion, giving humans time to regroup. Even though she was far from the fighters, her contribution made a difference. Carl noted that humans could fight as individuals but also as a team, using every talent, every skill, no matter how small, to survive. The midday sun climbed higher, but the battle showed no sign of ending. Carl realized that humans were not fighting like other species he had observed. Most species relied on brute force or simple fear. Humans used fear itself, both their own and their enemies, to shape the battle. They felt it, accepted it, and turned it into action. During a brief pause, Daniel Price gathered his fighters. He spoke quietly but firmly. "We are tired, we are hurt, but we are not beaten. They expect us to fear them. We will show them that fear can be used against them. Stay alert. Watch each other. Move together." Carol watched closely. He tried to understand this logic. Humans face death every day, yet they used fear not to stop but to guide them. He could not remember another species that did this. Even when exhausted, humans found strength in each other. Lisa Monroe checked on the wounded. She bandaged arms, helped the injured walk, and offered words of comfort. Carell was struck by her courage. She was not a fighter by instinct, but she moved among danger without hesitation. Every human he observed had a role, and every role mattered. The Thrinn grew frustrated. They had strength, size, and sharp claws, yet they could not defeat humans. Every attack was met with a counter. Every advance met with strategy. Carl noticed the fear growing in the Thrinn's behavior. They had never met a species that would fight so cleverly against such impossible odds. A human scout ran to Daniel Price, shouting a warning. A Thrinn squad was approaching from the north, moving faster than expected. Daniel nodded, adjusting his plan. He signaled to Lisa and Ryan. "Prepare the traps. Use the bridge." "Claire, get ready with the device." The humans moved quickly. They worked as one, coordinating without hesitation. When the Thrinn arrived, they were met with traps, obstacles, and fierce resistance. Sparks flew, rocks tumbled, and nets entangled claws. The Thrinn were strong, but the humans were smarter. Every Thrinn that advanced found a new danger waiting. Carl felt a strange emotion again. It was fear, but different from before. Not for the humans, but for the Thrinn. He realized that the humans' fear had become a weapon, turned outward. They were small, fragile, and tired. Yet they dominated the battle through courage, intelligence, and unity. By evening, the humans had forced the Thrinn to retreat once more. They were injured, exhausted, and dirty, but they had survived. Daniel Price and Lisa Monroe walked among their people, offering praise and comfort. Ryan Miller and Claire Thompson inspected the traps and devices, making small improvements for the next attack. Carol studied every movement. He understood now that the humans' greatest strength was not in weapons or numbers, but in their will. They accepted fear, felt it, and acted anyway. It made them unpredictable, dangerous, and terrifying to any enemy. The humans gathered around small fires that night, tending to wounds and sharing quiet stories. Even in exhaustion, there was laughter, small jokes, and comfort. Corral watched silently. He realized that fear was not the enemy of humans. It was part of their nature, and they used it to survive. He recorded everything carefully, knowing this observation would change his understanding of life. He had thought strength came from power, size, or weapons. He had thought survival depended on fear of death. But humans had shown him another way. Even in the face of creatures that should have destroyed them, humans had fought back. They had fought with courage, cleverness, and cooperation. They had fought using fear itself as fuel, not as a chain. Carl felt the first true respect he had ever felt for another species. He felt fear too, but now it was different. It was the fear of underestimating humans, of seeing what they could do next. Night fell over the settlement. The fires burned brightly, casting shadows over tired faces. Daniel Price stood quietly, looking out over his people, then at the forest beyond. Lisa Monroe sat with a group of children, speaking softly, keeping watch. Ryan Miller tinkered with his devices under a small lantern, and Claire Thompson cleaned and repaired her spark machine. Carl watched from above, silent, learning. Humans had survived. Humans had adapted. Humans had fought. And in their struggle, Carol understood something new. Fear was not weakness. Fear could be strength. He had learned more in a single day of watching humans than in centuries of studying other species, and he knew the battles were only beginning. The Thren would return, larger and more determined. But Carell now understood that the humans were ready. They were small, fragile, and weak in appearance, but they were more dangerous than any species he had ever encountered. He would watch, he would record, and he would learn. For humans, he realized, were not just survivors. They were fighters, thinkers, and something more. A force that could turn fear itself into a weapon. And the Thren would soon learn that lesson. The morning came slowly, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The air was still, almost quiet, but the humans moved as if expecting trouble. Carol observed from his hidden ship, noting every detail. After the Thren had retreated the night before, the humans had used the hours of calm wisely. They repaired walls, strengthened traps, and prepared for the attacks that would surely come. Captain Daniel Price walked along the rebuilt walls, inspecting the work. His hands brushed over the rough wood and stone, checking for weak points. He nodded to a few soldiers and civilians who were fixing the damage from the previous night. "Good work," he said quietly. "Stay ready. They will test us again, and we need to be ready for them." His voice was steady, but Carol sensed the tension behind it. Daniel carried the responsibility of every life in the settlement, and he bore it with courage. Lieutenant Lisa Monroe moved among the children, making sure they were safe and calm. Even in the quiet, her eyes never stopped scanning for danger. Carell was fascinated by her. She was not the strongest, nor the fastest, but she understood something crucial. Survival was not just about fighting. It was about protecting those who could not fight. Ryan Miller worked with a small team of volunteers, building more traps and reinforcing old ones. He had a plan now. He had learned from the Thren's previous attacks, understanding their patterns and weaknesses. Each trap was simple but effective: stones, wires, and small explosives, enough to slow the Thren and give humans an advantage. Claire Thompson adjusted her device on the hill, making sure it would cover the largest area. She had added more sparks and smoke, making it harder for the Thren to see or move without falling into traps. Carl studied her movements. Even a civilian could become a key part of the fight. Human strength was not just in soldiers or fighters. It was in everyone, using whatever they could to survive and fight back. By mid-morning, the first Thren scouts appeared. They moved cautiously, remembering the losses from the previous day. Carol noted their behavior. They were frustrated and careful, but still dangerous. The humans did not wait. Daniel Price raised his hand, signaling the fighters to prepare. The humans had learned to use the terrain. They moved silently through the forest, using trees, rocks, and rivers to hide and guide the Thren into traps. Ryan Miller directed small groups to control choke points, while Claire Thompson's device covered the open areas with sparks and smoke. Carol watched as humans coordinated their attack with precision. They were not just defending. They were planning to strike. A Thren emerged from the trees, larger than the scouts that had come before. Its claws were long and its teeth glinted in the sunlight. It roared, but the humans did not flinch. Daniel Price led a small team to flank it from the side. They moved quickly, using ropes and simple pulleys to drop nets and rocks onto the creature. Lisa Monroe guided a group behind it, forcing it into a narrow path where Ryan Miller's trap would work. The Thren struggled, trying to escape, but humans anticipated every move. Sparks flew from Claire's device. Smoke blurred the creature's vision, and nets pulled it off balance. Even as it fought back, the humans stayed calm, coordinated, and relentless. Carell felt the familiar stir of fear, but not for the humans. This time, he feared what humans could do. The battle spread across the forest. Small groups of humans attacked in unexpected ways. A group led by Daniel Price used fallen logs to create barriers, forcing Thren into traps. Lisa Monroe led children and volunteers to safer areas, then returned to the fight, guiding and helping others. Every human had a role, and every role mattered. Carell studied Ryan Miller as he moved among the fighters, repairing traps and directing attacks. He had grown from a nervous young man into a leader in his own right. Each trap he set, each device he repaired, made the difference between life and death. Humans did not rely on strength. They relied on ingenuity, courage, and teamwork. Claire Thompson's device became central to the battle. She moved from hill to hill, adjusting it constantly, keeping the Thren off balance. Sparks and smoke filled the forest, making it difficult for the Thren to see, plan, or attack effectively. Carol realized that even small humans using small tools could challenge creatures much larger and stronger than themselves. The Thren grew angrier. They attacked in waves, trying to force humans into submission, but every wave was met with traps, smoke, rocks, and clever counterattacks. Daniel Price led a small team to strike at the Thren's weaker members, using their momentum against them. Lisa Monroe guided civilians to safety while creating diversions that confused the enemy. Carl noticed a pattern. Humans learned from every move, adjusted, and attacked again. They were not predictable. They were not reckless. They were dangerous. Fear was present in their eyes, but it did not stop them. It guided them, sharpened them, made them clever and ruthless when needed. By mid-afternoon, the Thren were retreating. Their attacks were no longer coordinated, and they were falling into traps more often. Daniel Price's team pressed forward, striking decisively at weak points. Lisa Monroe used her knowledge of the terrain to block escape routes. Ryan Miller repaired and reset traps quickly, turning the forest into a maze for the Thren. Even civilians contributed. Small groups carried supplies, reinforced walls, and helped set traps. Claire Thompson moved among them, keeping her device active, providing cover, and inspiring others to act. Carl observed this with fascination. Every human, no matter how small or weak, had a purpose. Together, they were unstoppable. As the sun began to set, the humans forced the Thren into a narrow valley. Daniel Price signaled the final trap. Rocks, logs, and pulleys created a collapsing barrier, cutting off the Thren's retreat. Claire Thompson added sparks and smoke, blinding the enemy. The Thren roared, struggled, and fought, but humans anticipated each move. Ryan Miller led a group to flank the Thren from the side, cutting off any chance of escape. Lisa Monroe guided volunteers to block exits. Daniel Price moved to the front, striking at the Thren's weaker members, keeping them off balance. The humans were small, but they moved as one, using strategy and courage to dominate creatures far stronger than themselves. Carol felt something deep within him. He had studied fear for centuries, observed it in every species, and yet he had never seen it used like this. Humans faced fear, accepted it, and turned it into strength. Every human on that battlefield understood it, and every move they made used it to their advantage. The battle ended with the Thren retreating once more, badly wounded and confused. The humans had won not through strength or weapons, but through intelligence, courage, and unity. Even as they tended to their own wounded, they repaired traps and prepared for the next attack. Daniel Price gathered his people. "We did well today," he said quietly. "We protected our home, our families, and each other. But the fight is not over. They will come again. We must stay ready, stay clever, and never forget what we are capable of." Lisa Monroe checked on children and volunteers, making sure everyone was accounted for. Ryan Miller inspected the traps, making improvements. Claire Thompson adjusted her device, ensuring it would work even better next time. Every human played a part, and every part mattered. Carell recorded every detail, knowing he had witnessed something extraordinary. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were clever, courageous, and adaptable. They were small, but they could dominate creatures far larger and stronger than themselves. They were weak in body, but unstoppable in spirit. As night fell, the humans lit fires and shared quiet conversations. Laughter, though soft and tired, filled the air. Stories of courage and small victories were exchanged. Even in exhaustion, the humans found strength in each other. Carol watched silently. He realized that fear was not their enemy. It was their ally. It made them sharp, clever, and dangerous. He understood now what made humans different from every species he had studied. They could feel fear, face it, and use it as a weapon. They could fight not just for survival, but for ideals, for family, for each other. They were small, fragile, and weak, but they were dangerous beyond imagination. Carol turned his gaze away from the humans, thinking of the Thrinn. They would return, stronger and angrier, but the humans would be ready. They had learned, adapted, and proven themselves. And Carol knew something the Thrinn did not. Humans were unpredictable. They were clever, united, and fearless in the face of danger. He felt a new understanding, one he had never experienced before. Humans were not just survivors. They were warriors, thinkers, and something more. A force that could use fear itself to fight and win. The stars above the planet twinkled as the fires below flickered. Carell continued to observe, recording every detail. The humans had survived. They had adapted. They had fought, and in doing so, they had taught him a lesson he would never forget. Fear was not the enemy, it was a tool. And humans had mastered it. For the first time in his life, Carell felt true respect and a hint of fear for another species. He knew the battles were not over. The Thrinn would return, but so would the humans, and they would fight as they had fought today, with courage, intelligence, and unity. And when they fought, nothing, not size, not strength, not claws or teeth, could stop them. The humans had become more than a species to watch. They had become a lesson in courage, fear, and survival, and Carell would never forget it. The morning was quiet, almost too quiet. The sun rose slowly over the settlement, painting the walls with soft light. The humans moved carefully, checking traps, repairing walls, and preparing for what they knew was coming. Carell watched from above, hidden in his ship. He had learned much about humans, but he knew this battle would test them like never before. Captain Daniel Price walked through the settlement, speaking quietly to his people. They will come today, stronger and faster. We have survived, but we cannot underestimate them. We fight not just to live, but to protect everything we love. Stay ready. Stay smart. Stay together. His voice was calm, but the humans could hear the determination behind it. Lieutenant Lisa Monroe checked on children and volunteers. She reminded them to stay close to adults, to watch each other, and to follow instructions. Even in the face of fear, she moved with quiet confidence, guiding her people with care and courage. Ryan Miller inspected his traps for the last time. He moved quickly and efficiently, tightening wires, reinforcing supports, and adding small improvements. Each trap had a purpose. Each trap could save lives. He glanced at Claire Thompson, who was adjusting her spark and smoke device one final time. The humans waited. And then they saw the first signs of the Thrinn. Dark shapes moved through the forest, larger and more organized than before. Fires burned softly. Shadows danced and humans rested, ready to rise again if needed. He understood finally that humans were dangerous not because of size or strength, but because of their spirit, their courage, and their ability to use fear as a weapon. He recorded one last note before leaving his observation point. Fear is not the end. Fear is the beginning.
And humans have just begun. The humans slept, unaware of the alien observer above them.
They had faced death, danger, and impossible odds. They had survived. They had fought. They had won. And Carol knew this was only the start of what humans could do. Daniel Price used the terrain to channel them into traps, while Lisa Monroe used noise and light to distract them. Ryan Miller and volunteers created small explosions that forced the Thrinn to retreat temporarily. A Thrinn broke through a trap and advanced toward the settlement. A young fighter, Noah Benson, ran forward with a makeshift spear. He struck the Thrinn, dodging its claws, and forced it back into a narrow path where another trap waited. Carell felt something he had never felt before. awe. The human acted despite fear, despite danger, and with precision and courage. The battle raged all day. Humans and Thrin clashed again and again. Humans used strategy, speed, and intelligence to overcome strength. They moved as one, protecting each other, guiding each other, and acting with purpose. Even when wounded, they continued to fight, replacing fallen fighters, repairing traps, and using every tool at their disposal. Daniel Price and Lisa Monroe worked together, directing the humans with precision. Ryan Miller repaired and improved traps, and Claire Thompson adjusted her device constantly. Every human had a role, and every role was vital. The humans were small, but they acted as one, and together they were unstoppable. Corral observed the Thrin and noticed something new. They were confused and fearful. They had never met a species that fought so cleverly, so boldly, and so united. The humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and relentless. Carl understood now that human courage was different from other species he had studied. Humans did not fight blindly. They fought with purpose, with planning, and with the knowledge that every life mattered. As the sun began to set, the humans executed their final plan. Daniel Price led a small group to strike at the Thrin center. They moved quietly, using the cover of trees and rocks, and attacked with precision. Lisa Monroe created distractions, drawing attention away from the main strike. Ryan Miller and volunteers used traps to block escape routes, while Claire Thompson's device covered the entire battlefield in sparks and smoke. The Thrin roared and struggled, but the humans were ready. They moved quickly, striking where the Thrin were weakest, using every advantage they could find. Even as the Thrin fought back, humans adapted, improved, and pressed their advantage. Finally, the Thrin began to retreat. They had suffered heavy losses, confused and frustrated by the humans' clever tactics. Daniel Price and his team pressed forward, striking decisively and forcing them back into the forest. Lisa Monroe guided civilians to safety, ensuring that every human was accounted for. Ryan Miller and volunteers repaired traps and strengthened defenses, preparing for any possible return. Claire Thompson adjusted her device, making sure it would work even better next time. The humans had won, not through strength but through courage, intelligence, and unity. Carol watched silently, recording every detail. He had learned the meaning of fear not from books or observation, but from the humans themselves. Fear was not weakness for them. It was strength. It was a tool, a guide, and a weapon. The humans had faced the Thrin, a much stronger and larger enemy, and had used fear to survive and win. As night fell, the humans gathered around fires. They tended to the wounded, shared food and water, and spoke quietly of the day's events. There was laughter, soft and tired but full of relief. Stories of courage and small victories were shared, inspiring others to continue. Daniel Price stood quietly, looking over his people. He was tired, his body bruised, his mind alert. "We have won today," he said softly. "But we must never forget what we are capable of. We fight for each other, for our homes, and for our future. Stay ready, stay strong, and always remember what fear can teach us." Lisa Monroe moved among the children and volunteers, checking for injuries and offering words of comfort. Ryan Miller inspected traps and equipment, preparing for future attacks. Claire Thompson worked on her device, making small improvements for the next battle. Every human contributed, no matter how small, and every contribution mattered. Corral reflected on everything he had seen. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were clever, brave, and united. They were small, but their courage and intelligence made them dangerous. They could use fear as a tool, not as a chain. They could fight for survival, for family, and for ideals. They could act together in ways no other species could. The Thrin would return, stronger and angrier, but Carol knew the humans would be ready. They had learned, adapted, and grown. They had turned fear into strength, weakness into cleverness, and danger into opportunity. He felt a deep respect for the humans, and for the first time, he felt fear, not of them, but for what they could do. They were small, fragile, and seemingly weak, yet unstoppable in their courage, ingenuity, and unity. As the stars appeared above the planet, Carroll recorded his final observations. Humans had survived. They had adapted. They had fought and won. They had taught him that fear was not the enemy, but a tool. They had taught him the meaning of courage. And in that quiet night, Carroll realized the truth he would never forget. Humans were more than survivors. They were thinkers, warriors, and a force that could change the course of any battle, no matter the odds. The humans had faced the Thryn and won. They had faced fear and turned it into strength. They had faced impossible odds and survived, united and clever. Carroll looked down at the settlement, now calm under the moonlight. Their claws glinted, their red eyes burned with anger, and their roars echoed through the valley. This was not a simple raid. It was a full assault. Daniel Price raised his hand, signaling everyone to their positions. Humans moved without hesitation. Some took positions behind walls, others hid in the forest, while volunteers carried supplies and prepared the wounded. Carroll observed them, noting every movement, every small detail. The humans were ready. The Thryn charged, roaring and striking at the walls and traps. Rocks fell, nets snapped, and sparks flew from Claire's device. But the humans had prepared. They moved quickly, striking from hidden positions, using the terrain and traps to slow the Thryn. Even as some humans were injured, others replaced them instantly, keeping the line strong. Daniel Price led a small group to flank the Thryn. They used ropes to pull down trees, creating barriers and forcing the creatures into narrow paths where traps awaited. Lisa Monroe guided civilians to safety, then returned to fight, using quick movements and sharp instincts to keep the enemy off balance. Ryan Miller moved among the fighters, repairing traps and giving instructions. Every human had a role, and every role mattered. Even the smallest actions could make the difference between life and death. Carroll watched closely, fascinated and unsettled. Humans were small and fragile, yet their courage made them terrifying. Claire Thompson's device sent sparks and smoke into the Thryn, blinding them and confusing their attacks. She moved quickly from hill to hill, adjusting the device, making it more effective. Carell realized that humans did not wait for perfection. They acted, adapted, and improved in real time, using every advantage they could find. The Thryn tried to push forward, their size and strength giving them an advantage. But humans were clever.